Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. And welcome to The Gist, our signature evening show on foreign affairs and security. I'm Surya Gangadharan. As we speak, India and Pakistan have concluded a meeting of their Indus Waters Commissioners. They're meeting after a gap of about 2 years. As you're aware, there's an Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan, and it is customary for the two sides to meet alternately in either country. This time, because of COVID, it was, of course, put off. So the meeting was held in Delhi, and it's an opportunity for both sides to look at what they want from the other, to cite any violations or any transgressions, to find out what their plans are for harnessing Indus waters for their benefit. And I'm going to play a graphic right now. It will give you some background as to the Indus Waters Treaty. Could we just have that graphic? There you are. Now, what's interesting about this meeting of the Indus Waters Commissioners is that it's happening at a time when there seems to be some kind of a thaw, if you want to call it that, in bilateral relations between India and Pakistan. So let me give you a little background as to what this thaw is all about and how it happened. Could you have the second graphic, please? And there's also a letter from Prime Minister Modi to his Pakistani counterpart on basically that he wants better ties with Pakistan. Could we just take a look at that also, that letter? It's interesting. Huh? Yeah. So time to introduce my guests. I have two of them. Uttam Sinha is the head of non-traditional security at the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis in Delhi. And we also have Ajay Darshan Behera. He is the officiating director of the Academy of Security Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia, which is also in Delhi. Welcome to you both, and thank you for participating in this evening show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Uttam Sinha has just written a book on the Indus waters. In fact, that's the reason why we also brought him in here. He's done an enormous amount of work. It's a hardcover right now, and those of you, it will take, of course, time to read it. It's a very dense volume. Uttam, you've done a lot of research into this book. What's your understanding? What is the reflection that you have now that we've seen 60 years of the Indus Waters Treaty?
So thank you, Surya. Let me begin by saying that peace overtures creates a lot of excitement, especially when in the context of India and Pakistan. However, it doesn't really have an encouraging past. So we should treat it as with cautious optimism at best. We'll talk a bit about the Indus Water Treaties, and let's put things into a correct perspective. It was signed 6 decades ago in 1960. And it had no intention of any political overtones here. It was not even intended to be an exercise in peacemaking, right? It was simply a classical lesson in international mediation, and it kept politics and security away and quantified the entire basin and divided it. Now, the exclusive rights on the eastern rivers went to India, which was very important because we were having a lot of water development projects in Punjab in particular, including the Bhakra Nangal. So the
Yeah.
eastern rivers were critical for us. Pakistan got exclusive right on the three western rivers, that is the Indus, Jhelum and Chenab. In terms of the annual discharge, and this is where in retrospect we reflect whether India gave away too much or not, is that
Yeah.
the eastern rivers annual discharge is 33.8 million acre feet, whereas on the western rivers it is 135.6 million acre feet. So it's 1:4 ratio in terms of quantifying the basin. Pakistan obviously got more water. But we
Yeah.
forget something very crucial here on the western rivers, that India was given the right to store a volume of 3.6 million acre feet of water for hydropower, for flood moderation, and even for non-consumptive uses. India has woefully not fulfilled that provision. And it is something that India has to really reflect upon when we talk about the Indus Basin in the future, and even in the current context itself. I think one of the most striking features of the treaty, and this is an example where other international treaties can look into, is the dispute resolution mechanism within the treaty. That is the establishment of the Permanent Indus Commission, Article 8 of the treaty, where the commissioners meet every year, or at least once a year, definitely. And they are meeting now. This is the second day, and this is the 116th such meeting. So, it has a tremendous traction here, despite the wars, despite the animosity, despite the political difficulties, the Indus commissioners have met. What 60 years tells us is that if the treaty has worked, it is because India has allowed it to work. India
Yeah.
could very well, at many times, on several occasions, could have taken a hardline position and abrogated the treaty. India has not done so, means that it sees rationality in the treaty. It sees rationality in water sharing. It sees rationality in the hydro profile of the basin itself, because you can't really do much to it. You can't really stop the flow of water. So,
Yeah.
in a sense, India's rule-abiding upper riparian is a diplomatic victory that we have overall gained in the Indus Water Treaty in the last 60 years. But the past no longer is a strong indicator in the future. And I think the Indus Water Treaties will require a new set of analysis, a new lens.
Great. Ajay Darshan Behera, I'd like to come to you. Uttam has already referred to the kind of coincidence that there was, in the fact that in this commissioners are meeting also a thaw. Is this a genuine thaw? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, you can't call this a thaw, but at least some positive steps have been initiated. I mean, it's important to recognize that the ceasefire agreement of 2003 has been reiterated, and both sides will follow that. And the signals that have emanated from Islamabad, from both the Prime Minister of the country and General Bajwa. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, at this point of time, I mean, as Uttam said, I mean, there's so many false starts that just the beginning of this initiation gives us the impression as if this process will continue. We have to wait and watch, because I don't think so right now there's any clear indications from the Indian side, except for the fact that what you mentioned, that Prime Minister Modi has sent a letter to Prime Minister Imran Khan, and I think the President is also supposed to be doing that to the President of Pakistan. But we have to be a little cautious that what exactly? I mean, where do we start? Because the indications that have come, I mean, it's already conditional in the sense that both Prime Minister Imran Khan and General Bajwa made the point that we'll have to discuss Kashmir or
Yeah.
the resolution of Kashmir. Now, I think that's not the best way to begin the thaw. You need to get talking. You need to start the process, and then look ahead to sustaining the process before you come to the difficult issues. And I mean, the Pakistanis also realize and make it a point to tell us that that's a core issue, but that's probably not the best issue to start off with. But
Yeah.
I hope there is going to be some traction now, hopefully, given the kind of indications that have come from both the sides.
But Ajay, frankly, these overtures we've seen before, and the fact that you now have this caveat on Kashmir coming in, I mean, how serious are they?
Well, the seriousness can only be gauged in the course of time, in the sense that uh, what both sides are willing to concede, and then only we will get an idea as to to what extent this peace process can be different. We know the benefits of the peace process, so that's something that doesn't need to be reiterated.
Yeah.
But the point is, what kind of compromises both sides are going to make. That is what is important. So one will have to wait and watch that what are the small steps both sides are willing to take. From the Indian point of view, first, is there a real commitment to stopping terrorism? The fact that infiltration has gone down in the last few years, the fact that there's been no major terrorist attack in Kashmir for quite some time,
Yeah.
these are good indicators. So where somewhere we will have to recognize those and then look at the seriousness of the other side. And there are probably few more things which the Indian side can make demand and see if there can be concessions or movements on those grounds. Like for instance, on the issue of MFN. Now that's an issue which I mean, Pakistan never gave MFN status to India. Now they have to actually explain why is it that it becomes so difficult. We know there are problems, difficulties within the own country, but these are the kind of small steps, whether it's MFN, re-establishing, proper diplomatic relations, uh, probably, discussing a transit right to Afghanistan. If we find that there is no kind of seriousness in addressing these these issues, then I think we're not going to make much movement. But we can only be hopeful that both sides will sit down and discuss these issues and see if they can take it forward.
Uttam Sinha, you mentioned the treaty is 60 years old, 60 years old. And given the issues of climate change and glacier melt and so on, is there, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, is it time to start working on a new treaty, a modified treaty? What's your sense?
Well, I think you're right. And there is the real challenge on the Indus basin is not whether we should abrogate it or not. The real challenge comes from the geomorphical changes that are happening
Hmm.
in terms of demand of water, in terms of availability of water, and more specifically in terms of climate change impact on the basin. And on the other hand, then you have this treaty, which is alive and kicking. So
Yeah.
you'll have to start thinking, what do you do then? How do you readjust the treaty with the natural physical changes that are happening? And therefore, the question of revising the treaty or having a new treaty or updating the treaty is, of course, quite logical to think about. But for any treaty, you would require a proper political environment, a proper political understanding between two riparians to form a new set of treaties. Pakistan would never think about another treaty with India, given the
Yeah.
advantages it has got in
Yeah.
1960. So it's not really in its interest to talk too much about the revision of the treaty. What it does is very cleverly and very calculatively, it uses the Indus Permanent Commission dispute resolution mechanism to raise objection to Indian projects on the Western rivers, because these Western rivers are in Kashmir, and
Yeah.
therefore there is a political objective here to often raise objections, to raise technical objections, to stall and delay the projects, impose a certain cost on India. Many of the
Yeah.
projects since the 70s and 80s have been trapped in this objection raising which Pakistan does. And this is a serious matter now for India, especially when we engage in dialogue and communication on the Indus, how to really overcome this. Because they do take it to the International Court of Arbitration. Then it gets into this process
Yeah.
of dialogue, and then we have to stall the project, etc. So I think it's a serious business and a serious issue, and India has to really look into this matter. I think World Bank is an effective instrument to this. I think the World Bank needs to be told very clearly that it has to play the role of a third party, which doesn't necessarily mean always pointing an accusing finger at an upper riparian. It also
Yeah.
means looking at some of the deeds of the lower riparian, in this case Pakistan. Now, Pakistan has a horrendous water management approach. And I think the World Bank should quite clearly tell Pakistan about its poor approach to the treaty itself and misusing some of the articles and instruments of the treaty.
You mentioned the World Bank, Uttam. There's a question here from one of our viewers, Bijon Shah. What happened to the
Hmm.
Kishan Ganga issue that Pakistan raised with the World Bank?
Well, Kishanganga, like the Baglihar and like the Salal projects and like the Tulbul navigation, all have been raised by Pakistan, much to our own detriment, I think.
Yeah.
Look at the Salal project in the late 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
We lowered the height of the dam and we ended up with an enormous amount of siltation. The Tulbul navigation, which is an important element of waterways in Kashmir. It has a commercial return, it has an economic return, it has a clean format of movement of goods, has been stalled, and there's no forward movement on that. So yes, many of these projects have been or have had a negative impact on India. The Kishan Ganga is a striking case here, and here again, I think India will have to settle this matter. This drawdown facility of when you remove the silts from the dam, it's called drawdown flushing to tackle the sediments. And there is one particular clause in the treaty, clause 19 in Annexure E, which establishes the mode of flushing out silt through the use of low gates. And I think this technical use, this principle was enunciated in the award given in Kishan Ganga, I think. And this will be, challenging all future projects being planned by India on the western
Yeah.
rivers. You can't
Yeah.
really draw down flushing to remove silts. So I think this is a technical issue which India really has to grapple with when it comes to the many projects that it is planning on the western rivers.
Okay. Ajay Behera, we were talking about India, Pakistan. Is there an element of pressure from somewhere? Inevitably, the Americans come up. But we also find reports about the UAE royals claiming some credit for the India-Pakistan contact. Can you sift through all this?
Well, that's what there is to actually publicly make any assessment as to what exactly has happened in the back channel talks. Both sides have been very, very close-fisted, and not, releasing enough information. But maybe that's a good thing that it's not public knowledge as to what's happening in the back channels. One thing one can, obviously, something like this doesn't happen all of a sudden. One day the DGMOs just pick up the phones and talk to each other. There's of course certainly political signaling which has already happened.
Yeah.
And regarding the pressures that you talked about, one knows that the countries like United States and all, that they have consistently had a position that both India and Pakistan should talk to each other. While they don't want to kind of, get into the uh, come in between or, behave as mediators, despite the fact that I think President Trump actually did suggest that or indicated that that he's willing to become a mediator. But the point is, the US has always encouraged both sides. And the point that they would make is that it's in the interest of both the countries to come together to talk. So if there is some push behind from countries like United States, that should be taken for granted that
Yeah.
that's probably possibly there. The UAE role is something new that we're coming to know about, but I think increasingly, at least, there are indications that we have established good relations with UAE,
Yeah.
and maybe they just want to kind of help out, or maybe we have reached out to them. Well, that's something that one can only speculate about. That is it that the Pakistanis have reached out to UAE, or we have reached out to the UAE. But maybe UAE is being kind of considered as a neutral country for both the countries, and that could be the reason why they have been able to reach out to both the countries and bring them together. So at this point of time, there isn't sufficient public information to kind of be very, very clear about this question.
Uttam Sinha, you mentioned Pakistan being, using the treaty to delay our own projects. So, assuming the reverse can apply, I presume the treaty can also be used to punish Pakistan for bad behavior.
Well, it isn't as easy as you just said. Rivers are not like taps where you can close it and open it. For
Yeah.
that, you require long-term structural planning. The right kind of structures, dams, storages has to be built to manipulate and control the water. And India has never thought like that. So, such kind of instruments of punishment by controlling the flow of water is merely rhetoric. It has a very short span when there is when the pitch goes up politically.
Yeah.
You have this rhetoric building up, and it has a short span. It is short-lived. It has a certain purpose and objectives. Beyond that, it doesn't. So India really has to increasingly fall back on optimizing the provisions of the treaty, and it's the most practical, rational way forward, really. Uh, there's a whole lot of provisions on the western rivers which we have failed miserably. Some of the provisions on the eastern rivers also needs to be calibrated and calculated. I think we should simply follow the optimization process of the treaty. We need to build our storage capacity as an economic developing country with ambitions of a growth rate. We have one of the poorest per capita storage capacity of water in the world, especially when you compare it to America, Australia, even China, for example. So I think we need to build our storage capacity here, not only on the Indus basin, but also on the Brahmaputra and even on the Ganga. We have to pick our sites very carefully because these are seismic zones. We need to have a very intensive scientific study of our selection of these storage sites. But storage is critically important. We have been given under the provisions of the treaty to have 3.6 million acre feet of storage water on the western rivers. And we have, with the new projects, we'll be fulfilling 2.5 million acre feet of water. We still have 1 million acre feet of storage capacity. We have to also think in terms of hydroelectricity, but I don't think the hydroelectricity is that much more core of the provisions anymore, because we're moving towards solar energy, and there are other ways and there are other energy options that we can think about. One thing that we have
Uttam,
forgotten in the Indus waters, which
Uttam,
history
just one
tells us,
question.
yeah,
Uttam, one
yeah.
question. Where are the headwaters of the Indus? Is it in India? Is it in Tibet? Where is it?
Well, the Indus, some portion of the Indus flows from Tibet, and some tributaries which join the Satluj comes from Tibet. All the other rivers are on our side, which originates from Himachal in particular.
Mhm.
Right? No, but I was saying on the history of the navigation, the real navigation actually started on the Indus in the early 19th century by the British. And I think it is something that we have completely forgotten on the Indus. This is a new entry point, I think, to think about in terms of navigation of the rivers, to think in terms about watershed management, to think in terms about protecting the groundwater storage capacities that we have. These are areas that can really build into, water relationship between India and Pakistan. Essentially, water is a public component. You see, when we have to distinguish between people and regimes in Pakistan, we have to therefore then concentrate on water for the larger benefit of people. I think this
Yeah.
is something which will be important both in terms of a diplomatic tact, and also in terms of building a comprehensive a peace approach to the region.
Ajay, I want to come back to you. The this thaw and the so-called what do you expect will really happen? Something on the ground? You expect maybe an easing of trade rules? And what do you expect really?
Well, one, I think, they should go a bit slow because the regional dynamics, the peace process in Afghanistan, which is kind of coming up. I just hope both sides do not build pressures on the other. What that means is basically if the Pakistanis have expectations that India is going to reverse Article 370 or restore statehood in Kashmir, that's not likely to happen. So you can get into a logjam. So that's why I hope both sides can go a bit slow to build up the momentum. And that is where previously also I said that the best way would be to go about getting hold of the low hanging fruits,
Yeah.
and that would basically indicate if Pakistan is serious, and whether even India is serious about going ahead with this peace process. And what I would say is basically that, I mean, they can go back to 2007 when the kind of peace process almost came to an end, and pick up the pieces from there. I mean, we cannot discuss in details at this point of time that there was a lot of movement that had happened in terms of some kind of understanding on Kashmir and all. And if you remember the Islamabad declaration uh, about Pakistan not allowing its territory to be
Yeah.
used for promoting terrorism in India. If we can hold them to that, if we can get some kind of resolution to the Mumbai attacks, that's something that discussions are going to come on board. The discussions on Kulbhushan Yadav is going to come on board. Some of these things, if there is slow movement, quite possibly, this will be a more of a sustainable peace process rather than building up too much of expectations
Yeah.
that you can find solutions to the major issues. So it would depend. It would entirely depend on how both sides want to play this game. Uh, they should not build up too much of expectations, and then nothing happens. So we will have to wait a little bit and see, what is the reaction that's coming from the other side. And now, given that this letter has gone, and so let's wait, let's hope things
Yeah.
move.
Uttam, just to get back to in our last round, basin management. Is this something that we should now approach the Pakistanis and talk to them? Do we require a broader range of players here? How does that work?
No, I think it's a very good entry point. You see, the treaty is done and dusted. The treaty had a limited purpose. It was civil engineering in its emphasis. It was quantified, and there was volumetrics in terms of the volume of the water on either side. So I think that purpose has been solved. The volumes have been determined. I think the new set of challenges, as I explained, does require a basin outlook. And basin outlook, in a sense, in principle, requires effective cooperation because here is a river that crosses two countries. It's transboundary in nature. So it will
Yeah.
require a set of approaches which essentially fits into a more cooperative mechanism. And therefore, any thaw which might happen would obviously help this cooperative mechanism. And irrespective of the thaw itself, I think the basin would have a very uniquely defined mechanism here because it concerns people. It's existential, really. It doesn't require political barometers to measure the events on the basin. So I think the basin would require a different outlook. It requires a leadership investment here. And if India's entire neighborhood seems to be from Kabul to Dhaka and beyond, so you'll have to factor in the rivers very much in this
Yeah.
calculation.
Ajay, any last word on India Pakistan, where you see things going forward, say in the next few months?
So, as I said, it would entirely depend on how both sides want to take this forward. I would say that the diplomatic channels needs to be reinvigorated. The high commissioners need to be reappointed, sent back to the countries. And I think the first step that they should take actually is opening up the visa regime and improving people-to-people contact, and then the issue of trade, where again I think both sides will benefit out of that if Pakistan, which has been going through a difficult economic situation, if they really want to benefit out of this peace process, which they seem to be making that argument that India is going to benefit economically from this, but there are also benefits that Pakistan will naturally get. So the economy, the trade issues need to be brought on board after that. But I mean, the last words are this: that one, that our expectations whenever something like this happens, our expectations are just too much, and invariably we've seen that the process comes to a halt because of some issue or the other, invariably on the issue of terrorism. So if both sides want to make use of this process, the levels of rhetoric have to be kept in check, and some quiet negotiations. Maybe I think it was a good idea if there's been back channel talks which have resulted in this thaw. There should be more quiet negotiation between both sides, listen to each other, find out what the other side can do, because we have to understand that there are pressures on both sides. There are domestic constituencies on both sides. It's not as if the prime minister or the army chief is simply autonomous in whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
They will have to also look into the kind of domestic constituencies they have, and anything that's not acceptable to the domestic constituencies will not go through. And that's why, do not raise expectations too much, and do not try to wade into issues that we know clearly do not have immediate resolutions. So get into those issues which we know will actually create the ground for a sustaining peace process.
So just to sum up, as far as the Indus Waters Treaty is concerned, it has worked well all these years, but the time may have come for India to look at something much bigger than this, placing people at the center of this entire issue of water supply and water resource. And as far as the India-Pakistan thaw is concerned, well, we don't know yet if it's a thaw or something better than that. There seems to be a certain amount of caveats on both sides. They both have their reservations about dealing with each other. Nevertheless, some forward steps would perhaps be required for both sides to move forward and ensure a little more a better atmosphere, at least, so they begin dealing with each other. Ajay Darshan Behera, Uttam, Sinha, pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. And to all of you out there who tuned in to watch this show, keep sending us your comments and your observations. Do follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, and Instagram. Again, Ajay Behera and Uttam Sinha, thank you very much. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.